The cowboy found her crouched behind the henhouse, just before dawn, her hands shaking as she tried to hide 2 stolen eggs in her coat. The frost was thick enough to crunch under boots, and her breath came out in clouds. He didn't draw his gun, though most men would have. He just stood there, coat collar turned up, eyes calm and steady. "You break my fence," he said quietly. "You best fix it after breakfast." She froze, wide-eyed, like a deer caught between the moonlight and the man who owned it. Then he stepped closer, looked down at her dirty skirt, the bruises on her wrists, and the raw fear that said this wasn't her first night stealing to survive. He nodded toward the basket beside her. "You that hungry?" She didn't answer. "Fine," he said, tossing her a look that wasn't unkind. "You got 2 choices, girl. You can work for those eggs, or you can wear white beside me forever." The words hung in the cold like gun smoke, half joke, half challenge. But even he didn't realize how close they'd both come to making it true. Because by the time summer came, that same girl would be standing beside him in a church that hadn't heard laughter in years. And when the preacher said, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," the door would swing open, and 3 men with rifles would walk in to settle a score neither of them knew they'd started. That's how it ended. But here's how it began. Elias Boone hadn't planned on finding anyone that morning. He'd just gone out to check the fences, same as every day. The storm 2 nights prior had driven the coyotes close, and half his hens were jittery. He'd lost enough to winter and wolves. He wasn't about to lose the rest to some desperate stranger. But there she was, thin as a fence post, with hair the color of old honey and eyes too tired to lie. She couldn't have been more than 20, though hard miles had taken their toll. Her coat hung loose, man's coat, probably stolen, and her boots didn't match. When he caught her, she didn't beg, didn't cry, just stared at him like she'd already been caught 100 times before and knew how it ended. Boone lowered his rifle, leaned it against the coop. "You from town?" She shook her head. "Run away." Another shake. "Name?" "Claire," she said finally. Then, after a pause, "Claire Wren." Boone studied her face. It wasn't a name he knew, but there was something about the way she said it, slow, uncertain, like she hadn't used it in a long time. "You alone?" he asked. She nodded. He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck and pointed toward the porch. "Come on, there ain't no sense talking in the cold." Inside, the cabin was plain but warm, fire crackling, coffee pot hissing, the smell of hay and tobacco lingering. Claire hovered by the door like she didn't belong there. Boone poured coffee into a tin cup and slid it toward her. "Drink slow. You look like you ain't had a full meal since Easter." She hesitated, then sipped. Her hands trembled so bad he thought she'd spill it, but she didn't. "Where you headed?" he asked. "Anywhere but where I been," she said softly. He raised a brow. "That's not a place." She looked up at him then, really looked, and something in her eyes shut the rest of his questions down. "Fine," he said, nodding toward the window. "Barn needs sweeping. You can start there." Her voice caught. You're letting me stay, for now?" Boone leaned back in his chair. "Because I got too much work and not enough sense to do it all alone." By noon she was out in the barn sweeping hay and humming under her breath. The sound startled him, more than the gunfire he'd known in his youth, gentle out of place. Luke, his ranch hand, watched from the paddock. "You sure it's wise letting her stick around?" he asked. Boone didn't look up from his saddle repairs. "She's just a girl." Luke spat into the dirt. "Girls cause more trouble than wolves, boss. You know." "Then I'll take my chances." That night, Boone couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, listening to the wind and watching her shadow move through the lantern light in the barn. She was cleaning long after dark, careful with every motion, as if work could keep her ghosts from finding her. He poured himself a shot of whiskey, watched it glow amber in the glass. "Where the hell'd you come from, Claire Wren?" he murmured. "Outside," an owl called. The sound made her stop mid-motion and look toward the tree line, tense, listening. For a moment, Boone thought she might run, but then she just exhaled, leaned on the broom handle, and stared into the night like it had something to say. The next morning, he found her sitting on the porch steps mending one of his old shirts. "Didn't figure you for the sewing type," he said. "Didn't figure you for the forgiving type," she replied, without looking up. Boone smirked. "You always talk that plain." "Only when I mean it." Something in her tone caught him off guard, soft, but with steel underneath. He realized then that whatever she'd run from, it hadn't broken her completely. He watched her a moment longer, then said, You keep working like that, you might just earn yourself breakfast. She smiled. Small, quick. But it was the first real smile he'd seen on her. By the end of the week, Claire had turned the barn into something livable again. She moved quiet, worked hard, and didn't ask for much. But the more Boone watched her, the more questions he had. Where'd she learn to ride? Why did she flinch every time someone mentioned the sheriff? And why, at night, did she keep staring east, toward the hills, as if expecting someone to come for her? He told himself it wasn't his concern. She was just another drifter passing through. But the truth was, he'd started listening for her footsteps in the morning. Then one night, while checking the horses, Boone noticed something strange. Claire's saddlebag, the one she'd brought with her, wasn't in the barn anymore. He stepped outside, heart tight. The moon hung low, cold and bright. He followed her tracks toward the henhouse. She was there again, same as the first night, crouched low, head bent, whispering something he couldn't hear. Only this time she wasn't stealing eggs, she was digging, and when the shovel hit something hard beneath the dirt, Boone realized, whatever she'd come for, it had been buried on his land long before she ever showed up. The sound of metal striking wood cut through the still night like a church bell in a ghost town. Boone froze where he stood, half in shadow, rifle resting against his shoulder. Claire didn't notice. She kept digging, breath shallow, her hands moving fast, desperate. When the shovel hit the box again, she dropped to her knees and clawed at the dirt until her fingers struck metal. Boone stepped closer. You planning to rob me blind before breakfast, Miss Wren? Her head snapped up, eyes wild in the moonlight. For a second, he saw something he hadn't seen before. Not fear, not guilt, panic. Don't, she said quickly. Please, don't watch you steal from my land. Her breath came fast. It's not yours, Boone frowned. That box is buried on my ground. She hesitated, then whispered. It was buried before you owned it. That stopped him cold. Boone lowered the rifle slowly, his voice even. What's in it? She shook her head. I can't tell you. He took a step closer. You're on my ranch, digging holes like a grave robber. You'll tell me or I'll find out myself. Her jaw set. You don't understand. If I tell you, you'll wish you never asked. Boone stared at her a long moment, the wind tugging at his coat. Then he sighed. Get up. She didn't move. He grabbed the shovel, hooked it under the lid, and pried. The old wood groaned, then split. The smell that came up was old leather, oil and something faintly metallic. Inside was a small chest, iron hinges, locked tight. He looked at her. You got the key. She nodded, trembling. Then open it. Claire reached into her coat and pulled out a small brass key, worn, bent, kept close enough to have slept against her heart. Her hands shook as she fit it into the lock. With a click, the lid lifted. Inside lay a revolver wrapped in oilcloth, and a folded letter sealed in red wax. Boone's brow furrowed. You're risking your life for that. Claire swallowed. You don't know whose it is. Then enlighten me. She hesitated, then said, It belonged to the man who killed my father. Boone blinked. You buried the gun that killed him. Her voice dropped low. No, my father did, after he killed the man first. The words landed heavy, cold. Boone glanced down at the weapon. The handle was carved, initials faint, but visible. E.B. He looked up sharply. Your father was Eli Barden. Her eyes widened. You knew him. Everybody in 3 counties knew him, Boone said. Eli ran the Barden stage line until it burned to the ground. They said outlaws took it over. They didn't, Claire said quietly. The law did, she told him then, in halting breaths, like each word cost her something. Her father had discovered a smuggling ring using his stage routes to move stolen gold from Union shipments. When he threatened to go to the marshals, they set fire to his depot. He shot one of them before the blaze took the wreck. Then, before dying of the burns himself, he buried the weapon, proof of the crime, and told Claire to find it when she was old enough to fight fair. She was 12 at the time. Boone stood silent a long while, The fire in her story didn't sound like something she made up. He'd seen the scars on her wrists, the way she flinched at every shout. Why dig it up now, he asked. Because they found me, she said. The men who ran that gold, they're coming to finish what they started. Boone frowned. You mean to fight them with that? Their eyes met his. If I have to. Boone turned away, running a hand over his beard. He'd seen women hardened by loss before, war widows, drifters, widowed school teachers, trying to survive in towns that ate kindness for breakfast. But there was something different in her tone. Determined, final. You got a death wish, Miss Wren? She stood. No, just a debt. He studied her, then sighed. You want revenge, you'll get yourself killed. You want justice, maybe I can help you live long enough to see it. Her brow furrowed. Why would you help me? Boone looked down at the revolver, the initials EB, and then back at her. Because I fought alongside a man named Eli Barden once. Tennessee Front, 64. He saved my life. She blinked. You, he nodded. Didn't realize till now. The world went quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Claire knelt again, tracing the letters on the gun's handle. He said the man he saved was a cowboy from the mountains. Said he'd been mean as a snake, but worth saving. Boone's throat tightened. Sounds about right. She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, the fear in her eyes broke into something else. Trust. So what now? She asked. Boone exhaled slow. Now you tell me everything you know. Who's after you? What they want, and how many graves we're digging before sunrise. I carried the box inside, setting it on the table. Boone lit the lamp and poured 2 cups of coffee, his mind already turning gears. Names, he said. There were 4, she said quietly. Rufus Lane, Jonah Pike, and 2 others I never saw. Lane's the one who came to the house. He wore a marshal's badge then, said he was taken farther in for questioning. That night, the depot burned. Boone's jaw hardened. Lane's still around. He rides for the governor's circuit now. Calls himself a lawman, but he's bought and paid for. Then he'll be coming, she whispered. Boone nodded. Yeah, and he'll bring company. They worked in silence through the night, checking rifles, boarding windows, readying horses. Boone kept glancing at her, wondering how a woman that small carried so much weight. At one point she stopped and said softly, You could still send me away, pretend you never saw me. He shook his head. Too late for that. You dug up more than a gun tonight. What do you mean? You dug up a ghost, he said. And I aimed to bury it proper. Just before dawn, Boone stepped out to the porch, listening. The valley was still dark, the first light barely touching the ridges. Then faint, far off, came the sound of horses. He went back inside, face set like stone. They're coming. Claire reached for her father's gun, checked the barrel. Then we finish what they started. Boone gave her a small, grim nod. You sure you can shoot straight? She looked him in the eye. I've been practicing since I was 12. The 2 of them stood in silence, the lamplight flickering between them. An outlaw's daughter and a weary cowboy, bound by a promise neither of them asked for. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder. Boone ducked instinctively, dragging Claire down beside the window. Splinters rained from the frame. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by the sharp crack of horses' hooves, scattering gravel across the yard. He risked a glance through the broken glass. 3 riders. One carried a rifle slung low. The lead wore a long brown duster, and a badge that caught the morning light like a mirror. Rufus Lane. Boone cursed under his breath. He's wearing that badge like it still means something. Claire's hands were steady as she loaded her revolver. He's always liked pretending he's God's favorite. Boone turned to her. You see him before? She nodded. He's the one who came to our house that night. Smiled when he said my father was under arrest. Then he shot him before the fire even started. Boone's jaw tightened. Then this time, he don't walk away. Boone's mind flashed to the gun under the table. EB carved into the handle. He realized what Lane must have assumed. He thinks you're the one who killed your father, Boone said quietly. He thinks I'm Eli Barden. Claire's face went pale. Then he's not here for evidence. He's here for a body. Boone's eyes hardened. He's still gonna get one. He motioned for her to stay low, then crept toward the back window. The world outside was waking up, roosters crowing, sun spilling gold over the ridgeline, but all Boone heard was the faint rattle of spurs and the click of a rifle being chambered. He fired first. The bullet caught the second rider's shoulder, spinning him off his horse. Chaos exploded. Shouts, hooves, return fire slamming into the porch posts. Claire moved fast, firing through the kitchen window, her shots sharp and sure. One hit Lane's hat clean off, another shattered the lamp beside him. Not bad, Boone muttered. Not done, she answered. The fight dragged out longer than it should have. They were outnumbered, pinned. Smoke filled the room from spent powder, stinging their eyes. Boone reloaded, glanced over at Claire. She had a streak of blood on her cheek, not hers. A splinter burned from the window frame, and she didn't even flinch. You ever fought before? He asked. Not like this, she said, but I've dreamed it. Boone smirked grimly. Dreams about to come true. He ducked out the back door, circling the corral. He moved quiet, fast, years of war making his steps second nature. From behind a trough, he lined up a shot and dropped the third man clean. Lane shouted, Boone, you got no business dying for that girl. Hand her over, and we'll call it square. Boone shouted back, you call murder square now. Lane laughed. Depends who's doing the counting. Claire peered out the door, eyes scanning for Boone. The yard was chaos, dead horses, dust, sunlight flashing off gunmetal. Then through the smoke, Lane stepped forward, rifle aimed straight at her. Drop it, sweetheart, he said calmly. No sense in you ending up like your old man. She held the revolver tight. You killed him. I did what needed doing. Her voice cracked, and burning him alive was what mercy. Lane's smile didn't falter. He talked too much. Men like him always do. Before he could fire, Boone's voice cut through the smoke. Lane. The marshal spun. Too slow. Boone fired. The bullet tore through his side. Lane dropped to one knee, clutching his ribs, cursing. Claire stepped forward, gun shaking in her hand. Do it, Boone said. End it. She aimed, but her hand faltered. Lane laughed, blood in his teeth. Can't do it, can you, girl? You ain't him. You ain't your father. Boone stepped closer. No, but I am. Boone's rifle barked once. Lane fell backward into the dirt, eyes wide and empty. The echo rolled out across the valley and was gone. Silence followed. Claire lowered her gun slowly, breathing hard. It's done, she whispered. Boone nodded, scanning the yard. For now. He glanced at the horizon. There was a fourth man. Her heart dropped. Jonah Pike. Boone squinted toward the far tree line, faint movement, dust rising. He's riding hard east. Probably headed to town. To bring more. Worse, Boone said. To tell the law what we did. By noon, the ranch was quiet again. 3 bodies buried, smoke from the gunfight still hanging low. Boone sat on the porch steps, rifle across his knees, watching the road. Claire came out, her hair tied back, hands still trembling from the fight. You saved my life, she said softly. He looked up at her. You saved your own. She hesitated. You still could have turned me in. He met her eyes. You think I'm the kind of man that would? She shook her head. I think you're the kind that already lost too much to watch someone else get dragged under. He smiled faintly. Then his gaze drifted toward the hills. But we ain't safe yet. That evening, a storm rolled in. Black clouds over the ridge, wind howling through the trees. Boone and Claire took shelter in the barn. The horses stamped and snorted as thunder cracked. Claire sat on a bale of hay, staring at the gun in her lap, her father's revolver. Boone watched her quietly. You think he'd be proud? She shook her head. I think he'd be tired. Men like him never get to rest. Boone leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You will. She looked up. How? We just killed the law. He held her gaze. Then we build new rules. Outside, lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat, Boone saw movement by the gate. A rider, alone. He stood slowly. We got company. Claire rose beside him, gripping the revolver. The rider dismounted, stepped into the light. Rain slicked his coat, hat pulled low. Boone raised his rifle. Stop right there. The man lifted his head, and Boone's breath caught. It wasn't Jonah Pike. It wasn't one of Lane's men. It was a boy, 16 maybe, thin as wire, eyes too old for his age. He raised both hands. Don't shoot. I'm not here to fight. Then talk fast, Boone said. The boy swallowed hard. Name's Luke Pike, Jonah's son. Boone's grip tightened. The boy looked at Claire. He said, if you're still alive, I was to give you this. He held out a folded piece of paper, wet from rain. Boone took it, unfolded it under the lantern light. Inside was a single line, written in a shaky hand. You didn't bury all of us, Boone. You just gave us a reason to dig back. Boone's stomach turned. He looked up at the boy, but the kid was already gone, swallowed by the storm. Claire's voice trembled. What did it say? Boone looked toward the dark horizon. Means this ain't over, he said quietly. Not by a long shot. They left before sunrise. Boone saddled the horses in silence, the world still dripping from last night's storm. The air smelled like mud and lightning. Behind him, Claire packed what little they had, food, ammo, the revolver, wrapped in cloth. She didn't ask where they were headed. She just said, wherever trouble isn't, and that was good enough for him. They rode east, keeping low through the cottonwoods. The Pike boy's message still burned in Boone's pocket. He didn't know whether to believe it or not, but something about those words felt heavier than a threat, more like a promise. By noon they reached the edge of town. It wasn't much, a handful of buildings clinging to the rail line, saloon, general store, a sheriff's office that hadn't seen justice in years. Boone dismounted, tying his horse by the trough. Stay here, he told Claire. I'll find out what's true. I've spent my life waiting on men to come back from finding out, she said flatly. Didn't end well then, won't now. Boone gave her a look, that old half smile that said arguing was useless, and together they walked down the boardwalk. Inside the saloon, the air was stale with whiskey and secrets. A few eyes turned their way, travelers, gamblers, drifters. The piano sat silent. Boone spotted the telegraph operator in the corner, hat low, hand twitching near his belt. Morning, Boone said, sliding a coin across the counter. You seen Jonah Pike? The man looked up slow. Heard he was riding for Silver Basin. Word is he's gathering men. Claire's pulse quickened. For what? The man shrugged, said something about cleaning up the territory. Sounds like a posse, but smells like a gang. Boone's jaw tightened. He's setting bait. Us. The man's eyes flicked between them. You two ain't staying long, are you? Boone didn't answer. He just turned to leave, but the saloon doors swung open before they reached them. Two riders stepped in, dripping trail dust and confidence. One wore a deputy's badge. The other, a scar along his temple that looked freshly healed. Well, the deputy drawled, if it ain't Boone and the stage man's daughter. Boone's hand went to his coat, slow. You got the wrong folks. Don't think so, the scarred man said. Jonah Pike's got a price on your heads alive if he's generous, otherwise don't matter. The room went still. Boone whispered, Claire. She was already moving. The first shot blew through a whiskey bottle, shattering it across the counter. Glass rained. Men dove for cover. Boone's rifle barked twice. One man fell. The other stumbled, clutching his shoulder. Out the back, Boone shouted. They crashed through the kitchen, boots skidding on wet boards, then out into the alley. Claire fired once behind them, buying seconds. Horses waited at the end of the street. They mounted in one motion, Boone pulling her up behind him, spurring hard. Bullets hissed past their ears as they tore through the open gate, dust rising in their wake. By the time they reached the ridge, the town was a speck behind them. Claire clung to him, chest heaving. How long you think till they follow? Boone spat into the wind. Not long enough. They rode till dusk, stopping by a river bend where cottonwoods grew thick. Boone built a small fire. No smoke, low flame. Claire sat close, wrapped in his coat. She broke the silence first. You think Jonah Pike killed my father? Boone stared into the fire. No, he wasn't the kind to do dirty work himself, but he pulled the strings. And now, he wants to bury the proof. She nodded, quiet. Then we take it to someone who'll listen. Boone gave a humorless laugh. You ever met a lawman who listens to the truth? Once, she said. He's sitting right here. He looked up, her eyes steady in the flicker of firelight. For a second the world shrank to just that. Her voice, his heartbeat, the soft hiss of flame. He wanted to tell her she was wrong. That men like him didn't fix things, they survived them. But the words stuck in his throat. Before he could speak, a twig snapped in the dark. Boone's rifle was up in an instant. "Who's there?" A voice came back. Low, calm, easy. "Boone, you shoot me. You'll regret it." From the trees stepped a figure in a long coat, hat pulled low. When he raised his face to the firelight, Boone froze. "Luke?" The boy nodded, rainwater dripping from his brim. "Didn't mean to spook you. I followed you from town." Claire tensed. "Why?" The boy looked at her. "Because you don't know who Jonah Pike really works for." Boone's grip tightened. "Speak plain, kid." Luke hesitated, glancing at the fire. "It ain't just Pike. There's a man above him. The one who ordered your father killed, miss. The one who's running the smuggling still." "Who?" Claire demanded. The boy swallowed hard. "The governor." Silence fell heavy. Boone leaned back slowly. "You sure?" Luke nodded. "My pa worked for him. Pike answers to him still. That's why Lane wore that badge. They were moving gold under government roof. If word got out, the whole territory'd burn." Boone cursed softly. "So that's why he's still breathing. Ain't justice, it's politics." Claire stared into the fire. "My father died trying to tell the truth." Boone's voice was low. "Then maybe it's time we finish what he started." She met his eyes. "You think we can win against men like that?" Boone gave a small, cold smile. "Not sure, but I know one thing. I ain't running anymore." Thunder rumbled again, far off over the plains. Boone rose, checked his rifle, then nodded toward the Silver Basins 2 days out. "That's where Pike's riding." Claire stood, tucking the revolver into her belt. "Then we'll ride faster." Luke looked between them. "You mean to fight him?" Boone's eyes hardened. "I mean to end this." He kicked dirt over the fire. The light snuffed out. The night swallowed them whole. Above, lightning flickered over the distant hills, a storm waiting to break. And for the first time since she'd buried that box behind the henhouse, Claire Wren smiled. Because this time, the fire would be theirs. Silver Basin burned before sunrise. Boone and Claire rode through the smoke, guns hot, truth hotter. Pike lay bleeding by the gallows, whispering the governor's name before the fire took him. When it was done, Boone turned to her, breath ragged. "It's over." Claire holstered her father's revolver. "Not yet." She looked at him, steady, fierce, alive. "You asked once if I'd work or wear white," she said. Boone's grin cut through the ash. "Well." She took his hand. Both. Behind them the flames roared, burying the old world, and the new one began.